Chinuch Sefer HaChinuch Chabura. We are up to mitzvah Chaf Vav, mitzvah 26. These 2 weeks ago, we learned a little bit about the the mitzvah of believing in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the mitzvah of emunah in Hashem. And this week we are going to take a look at the opposite of that, the Isser of Avoda Zara. And we should probably send the link out to the Chabra. So,
isn't it obvious though, if you have a mitzvah to believe in Hashem, then of course you can't.
Yes.
Okay. You can't do Avoda Zara because that would contradict that. So then why have a separate mitzvah?
So it's a good question. We're going to get into the details of it. Like, what exactly is the Isser of Avoda Zara? What is that Isser?
I guess people can do it concurrently. Maybe people believe in Hashem, but then also on Sundays they go to the TV and watch football.
Right. That's a little bit of Avoda Zara over there.
I'm saying, and so that's why you need both mitzvahs.
So we'll get there. We're going to get there. Take a look inside. Take a look. You see what it says Chavav over here. Chavav Shaloi Na'amin Eloka Bilti Hashem Levadai. Not to believe in anything other than the Rebbeinu Shalom. So says the Chinuch as follows: Shaloi Na'amin Elohim Zulasi Hashem Yis'al Levadai. That we should not believe in any power outside of Hashem. So what the pasuk says, and obviously says Ein Od Novada, that there's nothing outside of the Rebbeinu Shalom. What pasuk tells you this in Chumash? Shenamar Lo Yelecha Elohim Achirim Al Panai. Don't have any other gods before me. Now, there's an implicit strangeness in this pasuk. The Isser is Lo Yelecha Elohim Achirim Al Panai. Do not have any other gods before me. What exactly does that mean? Are there other gods? Right?
Well, it could be.
Well, so that's interesting, because we'll see that the Ramban is going to point out that that's not what the Isser is. The Isser is not to make another god.
I don't make like a
Fashion, right?
I mean, act in a way where you're treating something else other than Hashem
As a god.
Well,
Okay.
what's the before me also? It could have just stopped without saying.
Right. Lo Yelecha Elohim Achirim. What does Al Panai mean?
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot to understand. There's a very long Ramban here that maybe we'll get to in a bit. But the Chinuch references this Ramban. But we'll see inside. He says, Perusha, what does this mean? Don't believe in any other power. Meaning, because of Ramban Zal, says the Ramban, the Torah only refers to Elohim Achirim as something that you might believe in. But on making, Torah never says do not make other powers, other gods. Because you can't actually do it. You can't make another god. You are not capable of creating this. And he was very good in the sharpness of this understanding. He says Divrei pi chacham chen, and the words of a chacham are very graceful. Meaning the Isser is not don't make another god. Don't make another deity, don't make another power. That's impossible. You cannot do that. It's not even don't bother trying. It's don't imagine that there are other powers that you could relate to. Lo yelecha. Don't ascribe this in your mind, in your heart, in your soul. Don't treat something as if. Meaning,
How does this align with like black magic users and things like that?
we'll get there. Hold on to that for the moment. We'll get there in a bit. Says the Chinuch as follows. It says, "V'zayis hamitzvah hi ha'ikar hagadol shabatara." This is the great principle of the Torah. Sha'kol talui alav, that everything rests on it. K'may sha'om Rizal, like the Chacham told us in the Sifrim Bamidbar, kol ha'moidev Avoda Zara ki'ilu kafar b'chol ha'Torah kula. Anybody that acquiesces, that acknowledges, that accepts the premise of Avoda Zara, anybody that agrees to it, is a kafir b'chol ha'Torah kula, has denied the entirety of the Torah. I don't want to make people too upset. Maybe I should. But like there's a value system that people like to talk about in conservative media in America. Judeo-Christian principles. Yes? You heard of that? Judeo-Christian principles. It says the Chinuch, that's Avoda Zara. There's no such thing as Judeo-Christian principles. Being minded to the fact that we have the same principles as them, they have the same principles as us, is giving some level of credence to Christianity, which is sheker. There's no such thing as Judeo-Christian principles. There's Jewish principles that they might have copied or not. Let's not forget that the Christian part of the Judeo-Christian principles included, hundreds of years of massacres of Jews and Christians. I mean, it's good and well that, Bible-toting Americans today are very quick, and we're grateful, but very quick to note the horrific pogrom perpetrated by Yishmael. But let's understand that, that playbook was written
2,000 years to get there.
Was written by the guys with the cross. Yes, like that playbook was not written by Yishmael originally. They've copied it. You know what I'm saying? I don't think that they're so excited to cite their sources. A little bit of plagiarism there, but let's understand where they came from. Says the Chinuch, you can't give credibility, credence to it. That's like denying the entirety of the Torah. We believe what we believe. They can believe whatever they want. But let's understand that it's not Avoda Zara. It's not the same thing. And I say this with all the gratitude in the world to the current position of the United States of America and the administration currently sitting in office. We have tremendous hakras with them, a lot of gratitude to them. But let's not kid ourselves into thinking that this is our value system. Because we should also note that, practically speaking, the White House is also pressuring Israel to open the Rafah crossing and send aid to Gaza, and we all know where that's going. That's not going to, even if we were to imagine that there are innocent Palestinians, which I'm not convinced whether they are or they are not. Maybe some little children, maybe, whose fathers are murdering Israelis. You know what I'm saying? Where do you draw the line there? I'm not entirely convinced. I'm not entirely sure. But let's just note for a second that the United States, while supporting the right of Israel to protect itself and to defend itself and et cetera, are also pressuring Israel to allow convoys of aid to make its way into Gaza, which is effectively supporting terrorism. Let's just understand that. The US could take a different position on this whole matter and say, carpet bomb the place. Put up an ultimatum saying, unless we have all 210 hostages, we will nuke Gaza City. You could say that. They're not saying that. Because their principles and our principles are not the same principles. And we are very grateful for US aid. But let's understand that the value system of Yiddishkeit and the value system of the United States of America are not the same thing. We have not seen the government coming out against the squad of anti-Semites in the Democratic Party. We haven't seen a public outcry. Hasn't happened. So again, a lot of gratitude, with all due respect, very nice. But, you understand what I'm saying? I'm saying it's not so simple. This whole thing is not exactly kosher v'yosher to all extent and possibility. No. Says the Chinuch, ve'echad ha'mekabel be'eloi ha l'shum davar zulasi Hashem levado. Anybody that accepts any source of power aside from Hashem, oy ha'oved osai davar kederach avodah Zara, or worships it in any way, shape, or form. Kalam kederach she'oved osai ma'aminim bo, like the way that people that worship it, right? Worship it in the way that people worship it.
What is that?
Well, that depends on what people will do to worship that thing.
But even if we're talking about what gives
we lend credence to, like we're talking about this issue, to governmental,
Right.
whatever, instead of who we should. When is that crossing the line of Avoda Zara?
Well, so he says anybody that's mekabel be'eloika, be'eloha l'shum davar zu l'aseh Hashem levado, anybody that accepts that power on themselves, meaning accepts it, meaning in their mind, this is a mental thing.
It says to themselves, okay, it's the
Hashem controls this, but something else controls that.
It's the ship that's defending not Hashem.
Right.
That now once you start thinking that, then
That's Avoda Zara. That's Avoda Zara. Or even if somebody says, no, Hashem is in control of everything, but they worship Avoda Zara in the way that people that believe in that Avoda Zara would do so, meaning even devoid of intention, but a person that would do the action. And this is important. This is a Jew that bows to the cross and is baptized. That's Avoda Zara, even without the intention.
Communism is a form of Avoda Zara.
To a certain extent, yeah.
Religion is not allowed, and the government is God, essentially.
Correct.
but there's no act like that.
Well,
So where's, you know what I mean?
right.
With an ideology that's not a baptism and boom. How does that?
So we'll get there. We'll see. We'll see in the details in a moment. It says, "Oh, afilu shaloi kederech avoda zara." Even if it's not the way that those things primarily worship. If a person were to do one of four things that are standard practices of worship, which are shehein zivuach, offering a sacrifice, vikitur, or offering incense, ve nisuch, or libating, right, pouring wine on an altar, vishtachavaya, or bowing, avar al le'yelecha, a person has transgressed le'yelecha. The only one of those things that is particularly relevant today is probably ishtachavaya, bowing. Although zivuch, kitur, v'nisuch do to a certain extent exist, kitur, zivuch, we don't really have many forms of Avoda Zara today that still practice animal sacrifice. Probably are some, but not ones that we're super familiar with in the West. Kitur, incense, that we absolutely have, right? The Far East, right? Religions of the Far East, and in India, there's a lot of kitur. If you light incense to Buddha, that's Avoda Zara. That's legit Avoda Zara. That's the real deal, right? Incense sticks in a Buddha statue. That's Avoda Zara. It's legitimate Avoda Zara. V'nisuch, libating wine. So that we absolutely have. Where do you have that in America today? All the time. Right, communion, right? Communion. The blood and the blood of Christ, body of Christ, that stuff, that's probably nisuch. That's libating wine for Avoda Zara. And so a lot of the time, by the way, they do use Kiddush wine. They use kedem. Yeah, so it's a long story, but yeah. Vishtachava and bowing. If you bow down to Avoda Zara, that's the real deal. It's and that happens a lot. That happens a lot in a lot of places around the world.
So is this why? Sorry, if you enter a church, is that Avoda Zara too?
Not always. Entering into a church is probably not Avoda Zara, but it could be. Depends on what goes on there.
Rabbi, aren't there certain forms of tzedakah that we do throughout the year that are meant, meaning like actual money, that are meant to replace a certain korban that we used to do?
Well, sort of.
So, in that sense, wouldn't you say that giving money to those things also serves?
I mean, it depends. Supporting Avoda Zara causes is also for another reason. That's Mesayeh de Avera. You are assisting people in doing an Avera. That's the Gemara at the beginning of Masechtas Avoda Zara, and the Rambam passes this in Avoda Zara and Shulchan Aruch, that you can't support businesses that it's very clear that money is going for Avoda Zara purposes.
Paying, for instance, the tarot reader or whatever.
For what?
It's like paying money for the tarot reader to tell your future or something.
Well, that's a separate issue.
No, you say even like certain Christian organizations, if you're donating to.
Yeah.
Like what their intentions are.
Yes.
Even if you're just thinking that just out loud, like if you donate just innocently to
Red Cross or something. Isn't Red Cross
any education, any that means
So it depends.
some of the money's gonna definitely go to
So that's the question. I mean, the question that the Gemara asks is can you sell wood? The Ramah deals with this question: can you sell wood or water to an Avoda Zara on Erev Christmas? Right? No, because you know exactly what they're going to do it. Right? You can't support them in doing that, yes, sir.
Even if they're not Jewish.
Yeah, because it's also for a guy to be Avoda Zara.
Right.
Now, it's just shallow whether or not Christianity is Avoda Zara for non-Jews. That it's Avoda Zara for Jews is for sure. Is it Avoda Zara for non-Jews? So that's an important question. Yeah, meaning non-Jews are not allowed to be Avoda Zara. They have to be monotheists. That's one of the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei right? A non-Jew is obligated in being a monotheist. However, the obligation of monotheism for non-Jews is a little bit looser. They are allowed to maintain the illusion, if they so desire, or the delusion that there is God and then there's other stuff connected to God. That's called in halachic material shituf. That there's God like joined with other things. That's some kind of hierarchical pantheism, if you will. There's God at the top, and then there's like other stuff, right? Pantheism, polytheism. That there's some other gods, little godalach that hang out with the Rebbeinu Shalom. That kind of Avoda Zara is, strictly speaking, mutar for a non-Jew, also for a Jew. It's a question of whether or not Christianity is actual Avoda Zara or quasi Avoda Zara. That's an important and interesting question. And the truth is, it's probably dependent on where and when you lived, because most Christians had no idea what they believed. It was an embargo against education, so Christians knew what they knew, and that was it. Right? They didn't have education; they weren't allowed to have an education. The priest knew everything, and you trust the priest. He's the guy that knows everything. They didn't. I'll tell you like this: priests didn't have chaburas like this. It's not like there's no such thing as balabatim by Christianity. There's the priest and the community parishes, the people that come and pray. Whatever the priest says is law. There's no such thing as like somebody like having it out with their priest, like debating about something. Like, I'm trying to understand this more and challenging. That doesn't exist. Mamish doesn't exist. Christianity, there's no such thing. It's like a chabura of gods, like learning together. It's like priest, bishop, pope, zeh. Like, guys don't get to learn. You weren't supposed to. You were supposed to just accept. That was like the foundational principle of Christianity, is just believe and accept. Challenge it and you're a kofar. By us, the more you challenge, the more you'll understand. Like, that's a good thing. But the majority of Christianity had no idea what they believed in. They just knew that somebody believed in something, and therefore, sayonara. Says the Chinuch, 3 ways that a person could be over Avoda Zara. Could be over on the Isra of Avoda Zara. You can transgress the Isra of Avoda Zara. Number 1 is the way that you think. You could think that something is true that isn't, right? Or you could worship Avoda Zara in the way that it is worshipped, depending on what Avoda Zara you're talking about, right? So, I don't know. Let's say that there was some kind of prayer that was said in order to worship a particular kind of Avoda Zara, and you say that prayer, that's Avoda Zara. Or, even if you didn't do one of those things that are specific to the Avoda Zara, if you offered a sacrifice or incense, or you bowed, or you libated wine, so in all of those things you have those 4 things. One has been over the Isra Avoda Zara. Says the Chinuch, v'nisach v'zorich davar echad hu, pouring out wine or throwing wine, that's the same thing. U'mischayvim b'zrika kama v'nisach, the Gemara in Sanhedrin says that you are chayav for both of those things.
Did Avoda Zara, like the desire for come out as a result of us having like temple services, or was it more of a result of we had temple services and we lost it, and then people had that desire for it? I guess the real question is, what happened more? Did it happen more concurrently with Beis HaMikdash services, or more before and after?
So in order to do this, we need to understand the roots of Avoda Zara. So give me 1 second while I print this, because this is Kedai.
There was that thing during the Kingdom of Judah where someone started opening up sort of like remote temples, and that was all controversial.
So that was already
No,
much
that's-
later.
I'm
Much
talking about
later.
that. I want to bring that.
Much
About
later.
Private barbecues.
Brick pickup.
That's
Right.
what it was.
More like brick-
Literally.
It was more like brick drop-offs.
Right.
No, but I'm trying to like get in the mindset of like, when did this happen the most?
So we're gonna take a look at this in a minute. Hold on.
You know,
Yeah, I got you. Hold on 1 second.
because like for me, if there's a base of Migdash and you do the Avoda Zara, it's like
Yeah, but
it's like how can you do that? There's a base of Migdash right there.
Yeah,
But if there's no base of Migdash and you're
So I'm
trying
gonna-
to do
but
something,
I'm
there's
gonna-
a story with Abraham and the fire.
I'm gonna make your question a little bit more difficult before we make this a little easier.
okay,
First and foremost, let's make this a little bit more difficult.
okay,
And the question is as follows: Adam and Chava were created by Hashem, yes?
yes.
So at what point in time did people start worshiping Avoda Zara?
I mean, can you argue that kind of have all that from their sacrifice that they knew how to do other sacrifices, or is it-
I'm saying, but like Avoda Zara meaning that people like began to worship idols. When and where did such a thing occur?
From the moment that Hashem said, "Don't do Avoda Zara," somebody went and did it.
But I'm saying,
So Shem, Ham, and Yafet, one of them. probably
So-
went and
disobeyed.
so
when they got off the ark, probably Ham or somebody went and did Avoda Zara.
It was maybe it was before then. Before
There was no Avoda Zara because there was no rule against it.
there certainly was.
there, where the world was destroyed.
But then what's the point of the Shem mitzvah really now?
So 6 of them, the Rambam says, were given to Adam.
Just a reminder.
The 7th was given to Noach. 7th, which was, don't eat a live animal. Ever melachai. In order to understand this,
Yeah, that's a crazy topic in and of itself. Like,
yeah, we'll get there.
why do we need a law that says that? You know, what I'm
People
saying?
do that. What do you mean?
Yeah.
In
Do me a favor.
Japan.
Grab the sheets that just came into the printer and
Yeah.
because we need to see this inside.
You don't wanna-
This is essential.
Oh, maybe they were doing that in the ark. Yeah, no, maybe if it's given to Noah, maybe there was some things going on in the ark.
Maybe,
They're
right?
taking some bites out.
Right. So
That's a
everybody
great-
get a
that's
copy there?
great
Yeah.
point.
Okay, good. Okay. So this you got everybody got? Everybody got a copy there? Okay, good. Okay. So this what you have here, is the first chapter of the Rambam in Hilchos Avoda Zara. The Rambam is going to tell us the history of Avoda Zara. How did it happen? How did Avoda Zara begin? Says the Rambam as follows. It says, B'mei Enosh, in the days of Enosh, Tau b'nei Adam Taos Gadol. People made a big mistake. Who was Enosh? No.
Was it Enosh or Enoch?
Enosh.
Is that a different person?
Yes.
Oh, okay. No.
Enosh was the grandson of Adam. Adam, Sheis, Enosh, third generation of humanity. Right? This is the great grandfather of Noach. Avoda Zara starts third generation of humanity. How? B'mei Enosh, right? To b'nei Adam Taos Gadol, people made a big mistake. V'nivara atzas chachmei osadar, and they were consumed by this idea that was suggested by the wisest people of the generation. V'enosh atzmei min hatayim haya, and Enosh himself was one of the people that made this mistake. This was a mistake that began as a miscalculation. What was the miscalculation? V'zu hayisat ta'usam. This is their mistake. Amru, they said, Ha'il va'eloikim barakochavim elu v'galgalim lahanhig esa olam. Since Hashem created stars and orbits in order to control the world, Unsanam b'marim, and placed them in the highest spheres. V'chalak lahem kavod, and gave them great honor. V'heim shamashim hamishamshim lefanav, and they are the servants that serve before him. Ru'uyim heim l'shabcham lefaram v'lachloik lahem kavod. It is appropriate to praise them and to exalt them, to glorify them and to honor them. Meaning, Hashem has created many powerful things in the universe. We should honor God by honoring his emissaries. That was the beginning. And they argued, V'zeu ritzayin hakel baruch hu. This is the will of God. Hashem wants us to give honor to those that he honors, that he has given honor to. He wants us to praise that thing. In order to give honor and glory to Hashem, we should honor that which Hashem has created in this world to serve him and to provide for humanity. So Hashem created the sun in order to give light and heat and energy to the world. So we should honor the sun. We should give praise to the sun. We should have a day every week dedicated to its worship. Sunday. Not far off, by the way. Meaning, modern Christianity and ancient paganism, very, very closely related. Because the king wants to honor those which stand before him. And this is the honor of the king. Since they began to think about this, they began to create temples for these stars, and offer them sacrifices, and to praise them, to exalt and glorify them, with words, and to bow down to them, in order to do what they imagined with their perverse understanding was the will of God.
Well, why did they just, if they, assuming the premise that they had the understanding that the sun is part of God or a representative of God, then go to the source? Or is it that they didn't understand that there was a...
No, they did.
So they understood that there was a source.
Yes.
It's easier to connect to something that you can tangible.
So there are two pieces to it. One is the ease of connection, and the second is the ease of disconnection. Because if you worship the sun as the primary emissary of God, so while the sun is shining, you think about God. But when the sun sets, you don't have to think about God. Meaning, the more tangible you make your thinking of God, the easier it is to escape that. Ultimately, God is omnipotent, omniscient, transcendent, beyond time, space, matter. Our obligation is to recognize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is everywhere, at all times, in all places, in all situations, all-knowing, all-seeing, all-understanding, in everything.
But we do have things like tzitzis, yarmulkes to remind us.
Yes,
Like we did take a piece of that.
but we don't worship those things.
You can't close the door and just pretend it's not there.
Right. Hashem, it's not like Hashem is in shul, but not at home.
Right.
The more that you compartmentalize your avodas Hashem, the more freedom you have to engage in other things. Like what happens in Vegas, right? That's it. They created a society, and this is the Beis Yaakov explains this in Precious Bereshis Enoch, that the Ikar of Avoda Zara was a desire to replace God with a servant of God, which is not omnipotent and omniscient. It makes God more tangible, so you feel much better about your service, and also frees you up to not engage in that whenever you want. Or you have on times and off times, right? So you have people that now feel much frommer because I feel like I'm connecting to this thing. That's 100% your point. I'm connecting to something. Look at that. It's amazing. Right. I get to freelance the rest of my time, right?
I mean, this explanation really puts in the answer for how bad Avoda Zara was, because it's doing exactly what we're describing,
Right.
compartmentalizing it.
So the Avoda Zara is interesting, and there's a lot written about what exactly their goal was, what exactly they were trying to do. We'll learn a little bit more, and then we'll see where that came from to a certain extent. But says the Rambam as follows. It says, this is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 lines down from the top of the page. This was the primary Avoda Zara. And this is what those that knew what they were talking about would say. They never said that there's no such thing as God. There's just this star, this constellation, the sun, the moon. They never said there's no God. What do they say? They just said that this is the way to worship God. This is, he quotes the pasuk in Navi that nobody denied God. Kalomar, hakol yodim she'atahu levadcha. Everybody knows that you, Hashem, are one and only. Aval ta'usam uksilusam shemedam shezeh hahevel ratzonchahu. People deluded themselves into thinking that this is really what will make Hashem happy. So this is ke'ilu. Somebody having this perverse thought that my wife really wants me to be happy, so sleeping with somebody else will make me happy, and therefore she wants this. She wants me to be happy. So this is meaning it's Cain that. And by the way, and the Navi describes like that our Avoda Zara is effectively that of a cheating spouse. It's like, but you really want me to be happy, right? Because you love me, so you want me to. No, Babala, you've missed the boat completely, entirely. Like chas v'shalom. But a person can mamish convince themselves of these things. And says the Rambam, this is what happened. They deluded themselves into thinking that this was the Ratzon Hashem.
But they didn't have a directive. They didn't have like Torah. They didn't have Malachim. They didn't have, like, what did they have? I guess they saw that
They had truth.
Noah, like from Hashem
No,
told Noah,
this
like, what did
before now. This is Adam Rishon. This is. Do you need a directive for a husband to know not to cheat on his wife? No. Why not?
This is obvious.
That's implicit in being married. That's what it means. Where does it say? Where does it say that I'm not allowed to? What do you mean? Where does it say?
In the Torah.
No.
That's what
Aside from that, I mean, for
people
non-Jews.
would argue nowadays,
For non-Jews.
If it wasn't in the Torah, people would say.
For non-Jews.
"Oh." I mean, I think it's even worse. Kavachona for non-Jews, they have to have it like stapled to their heads. You are not allowed to do this. For Jews, we're sitting there and dissecting between lines. Because this is said in the fashion of this, we know you can't. For a non-Jew, it's do not do this. That's why they don't follow anything other than like the 10 Commandments.
Maybe.
Because for
Maybe.
them, it has to be like 3 words.
No, but I'm saying.
Don't do this.
But if not for the fact that the Torah had told you that you can't sleep with somebody other than your wife. Would you have imagined that? Yes, of course you would have. Any normal, moral, healthy, thinking human being would know that. It takes an extreme amount of perversion, or an extremely perverse society, for that to not be obvious. That's an obvious truth. These things are obvious. The Isser of Avoda Zara is obvious.
Aren't all the elements of kind of in that way? Obvious?
Yes. Yes. Meaning, this is the way that Rabbi Blachman explained to us. To say, if you ever asked Adam Arishan, you asked him, Adam, where did you grow up? It's like, yeah, Gan Eden. And who is your Rebbe? Hashem. And who is your Shadchan? Hashem. Who gave you your first job? Hashem. You know what I'm saying? Like, Enosh was not like, he grew up in a world where that was obvious. All of these things were obvious. To everybody that was there, that was obvious. These things were obvious. Ella, at some point in time, people started thinking, well, how can I delude myself into something else? And the Yetzer Hara eats away at a person little by little. Like that's how it works. Says the Rambam, he says, after many long days, there were Nevi'ei Sheker. There were those false prophets that arose. They said, once you already have a mass illusion or delusion, so this gives way to charlatans, to people that know better and want to be able to exploit the ignorance of people. She says, people would stand up and say, Ivdu Kochav Ploni, and go worship the star. Or Kala Kochavim, or all of these stars. V'akrivulai, and bring sacrifices. V'naschulai, and pour libations to it. Kach v'kach, like this and this. Ubanulai Heichal, and make a temple for the star. V'asu tzura asai kedei lishtachavas, and make an image, a likeness, a statue, an idol, so that you can bow to it. Kol ha'am, hanashim aktanim, v'shara amar, it's all the people, women, children, and ignorant people that weren't, well versed in philosophy. And then they would invent like this shape, the statue that they came up with. This is the shape that I was informed by this angel, the star, this power that you should worship. And then they built these temples. They carved it into trees at the top of mountains, and on all of the peaks. They would gather there and they would bow to it. They would say to the people, this image will do good or evil to you. And you should serve it like this, and you should fear it. Meaning, once there was already in the hearts and minds of people this idea that you could worship something outside of God. So once you can already worship something that's not God as a way of worshiping God, so then all bets are off. The floodgates of creativity are now open, right? You can say whatever you want. You can do whatever you want, because now that you've invented this idea, you can do whatever you want with it. You can be as creative as your heart desires. And this becomes very, very dangerous. This is also why, by the way, we have an issue in the Torah about Tosef. Don't add more to the Torah. Torah tells you to do these things. Don't invent more things. Don't say that Hashem doesn't want you to only do that. Hashem doesn't want you to shake 4 minim, shake 5. Take another one. Hashem doesn't want you to just have 4 boxes in your tefillin. Have another one.
It's a fine line for
Do we have to be
photos.
careful with customs then?
Yes. You need to know what's a custom and what is not a custom. The din is that a person that takes on a custom thinking that that's mi'ikar din, that that's the halacha, has not taken on a custom. They should give it up. Somebody that takes on a custom knowing that it's a custom wants to give up that custom. has to do Ataras Nadarim. Because they're taking a neder, taking an oath to keep up with the custom. But somebody that thinks that the custom that they're keeping is the halacha, is what the Torah wants, that's what Hashem says, that's what the Chacham says, something like that. And then they figure out afterwards, no, that's a chumrah. So they can stop doing it immediately. They never took it on. Because if you took it on thinking that it was the halacha and it's not the halacha, give it up. Doesn't exist. It's narishkat. It's nothing. Says the Rambam, what happens? The Kohanim, the priests amongst them, the priest class amongst these shakranim, said, in order to be successful, you should in order to be successful, you should do these things. And they came up with all these rules. Do this and don't do that. Started inventing rules. And then after the false prophets comes other charlatans that show up and say that the star, this constellation or whatever, spoke to me and said, if duni bekach v'kach, worship me in such and such a way, and told me that this is what you should do. And do like this, and don't do like that. By the way, there's an entire 20% of the world that believes in this. This is called Islam, right?
No, but Islam is not
They invented just like this. There was
no,
a
but
fellow.
it's not, but,
There's a fellow by the name of Muhammad who was a murderer, a rapist, and a pedophile. Sorry, Mark Zuckerberg, don't tell them I said that. That's what he was, according to Islamic writings.
but
That-
Rambam doesn't say this.
The Rambam doesn't say that he was a murderer.
No, he doesn't say that he's of the Kohabim.
He says he's a Russia.
Yes, he does say that.
So
And he says, Goyim are allowed to pray there.
again, that he's a Russia, yes. Whether or not Islam is Avoda Zara is a separate question. But understand that how did he gain popularity? He said that he dreamed that some angel came and spoke to him and put him on a flying horse and took him to Harabais, and now everybody has to listen to him or die. That's called Islam. That's what it came down to. It's a charlatan. Charlatan that happened to be very successful at being a raper, a murderer, a pillager. And you see that he has deridaris of people that follow in his footsteps. And that's not to say all Muslims are murderers, rapists, and pedophiles. But there certainly are some that are, and do it in the name of Islam. Pashat, yes? I'm saying they do it in the name of Islam. They don't say, no, we're violating Islam. We're caving to our base desires. They say, look, this is what Muhammad told us to do. That's it. Says the Pashat and the whole world was caught up in the days from Enosh until Nach with all of these falsifications, all these services, all of these different things, and to bow to them and to bring idols, to bring sacrifices to these idols. And after many long days and years, people forgot entirely that there was a God, creator of heaven and earth. And they had no idea of this. And all the ignorant people in the world, with women and children, all that they knew was the wood or the stone. And the palace of stone, that they imagined, that they dedicated in their lack of intelligence, the lack of awareness and understanding, that this is the place to bow, and to serve, and to swear in its name. And the wise people amongst them, they're the wise people amongst them, like the professors in Harvard and in Penn, right? That imagined all of these things. And They imagine that there's no God, there's only Hamas and liberalism. I mean, Avoda Zara and constellations. That they made these things for them to become like them. But the creator of heaven and earth, nobody thought about, nobody knew about. They didn't know him. Except for a select, very small amount of people, a secret society of people that know the truth. Keep going. For example, Chanach, like Chanach, or Mesushalach, Noach, Shem Va'ever. Like these chavra that we have at the end of Parashat Bereshit, the beginning of Parashat Noach.
Who's Hanuk?
Chanach was the great grandfather of Noach.
Was he one of the third generation?
No, that's Enosh.
I know, I imagine Enosh wasn't the only one.
No, so Enosh's grandson, I think, grandson or great grandson was Chanach.
So
Says-
his son and his grandson didn't know God.
We don't know, but the Rambam lists these. It says Va'al derech zeh haya olam holech misgalgel, and like this the world was rolling ad shenoilad amudai shel olam vehu Avram Avinu, until the pillar of the world was born, and that is Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu became the pillar of the world. He was the one that returned humanity to monotheism. That was Amudai shel olam. You asked the question, how did Avoda Zara happen? It happened through the best of intentions, which are really the worst of intentions. But it didn't look like that right at the beginning, right? Meaning, you want to talk about, by the way, and we should own this in a very real way. The Amaratzim idiots on college campuses that are screaming for free Palestine, Imach Shemam v'Zichram, they think that they're fighting for a just cause. They don't think that they're hating people. Elamai, deep inside of their fighting for a just cause, is a certain cynicism and hatred of Klal Yisrael that manifests in this way. But they don't think that they're doing anything wrong. You understand? It's a toes as far as they're concerned. Now, hidden inside of that is a very deep rishus, which has been following Western society since the First Crusade. And truth is, even before that, since the Roman Empire. A deep hatred of the Jewish people, where anybody that wants to kill the Jewish people gets support. And it's manifest dar after dar, after dar, after dar, in all these different ways, and that's called Golus. That the world doesn't look at us and go, wow, Klal Yisrael, don't touch them. They force us into these all sorts of weird conundrums of, do we do the thing that is right and moral and just and true, or we do the thing that the world will be okay with us doing? Not so simple. Not so simple. At some point in time, Le'aleinu, we might well get to a point that we don't have a choice. That Miman Afshach, it's either going to be that Klal Yisrael is destroyed in Eretz Yisrael, or that we do some very devastating damage. And then, rather than be dead, we'll be hated. But imagining such a situation, the Klal Yisrael does what it needs to do, what we need to do, without that total ultimatum, I don't know. It's very scary. That's Avoda Zara. Avoda Zara is imagining that there's a power aside from the Rebbeinu Shalom. We have a lot to daven for, and the more that we work on our emunah and understanding Eino Milvado, that everything is the Rebbeinu Shalom, and that Torah is Torah, the Torah is Torah, halacha is halacha, and that there's nothing else that gives koyach and chayil and tremendous power to Klal Yisrael to pick up the slack. But it should be a good night for us and a great week for Klal Yisrael. We should figure out how to win these wars and be zocha to be a skald tzedek b'meher b'mein. To the people following